A new era is emerging. Quantum technologies are accelerating across the globe, transforming computing, sensing, and communication. Now a multi-billion-dollar industry, growing year by year, powered by collaboration across industry, government, and academia. Today, we bring that progress into focus through the State of the Global Quantum Industry Report. Welcome to the QED-C Quantum Summit.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Louisa Savage. I'm editorial director of Washington Post Intelligence, which is a new analysis and briefing service for business and policy decision makers at the intersection of industry, technology, and policy. And it's my very big pleasure to welcome you here to the State of the Global Quantum Industry at the QED-C Quantum Summit. It is just great to see so many of you here in Washington and have met so many just fabulous and brilliant people at last night's reception who are here literally from all corners of the country and around the world. It really shows how global the quantum industry is. And to that point, yesterday was World Quantum Day, a reminder of how far this field has come in a very short time. And also a huge welcome to those of you on the live stream. We're connecting this community around the world. It's a dynamic community. The quantum industry is accelerating. And we will hear today about the big progress in investment in workforce, early commercialization, and some of the important questions that are being raised about the future of this ecosystem. I personally became intrigued by what is happening in this industry. Back in January, I was at Davos in Switzerland, where the Washington Post was hosting various events. And one of our speakers was Michael Kratsios, the president's science and tech advisor. And he made this comment that stuck with me. He said, quantum computing is today in this administration where AI was in the first Trump administration. And that really made me want to learn more because we all know how AI turned out. But as a journalist, I want to see data, not just hype. So it's particularly exciting that today's discussions are anchored in the release of the State of the Global Quantum Industry Report from QED-C, which is very rich in data, as well as some projections for the future, which we will discuss on stage in a little bit. Over the next part of the program, we'll begin with key insights from this report, and then we will move on to two conversations, one focused on government leadership, which is playing such an important role, and one on industry to explore what these insights mean in practice and perhaps to reality check and pressure test them a bit. So to begin, it is my pleasure to welcome our host, Celia Merzbacher, Executive Director of QED-C, to offer her opening remarks. Thanks, Celia.
Thank you, Louisa. And I had the pleasure of doing a webinar with Louisa as host, and it was really so exciting and well done that we had to get her involved with our community here today. So looking forward to hearing more about the report that's just been released. I just wanted to give a little bit of background and context. QED-C was, as I think all of you know, established by the National Quantum Initiative Act in 2018, where the Department of Commerce, and in particular National Institutes of Standards and Technologies, or NIST, was directed to establish a consortium of stakeholders. Fast forward, here we are 7 years later, and it really feels like this consortium of stakeholders has built a community. I look around and see so many faces and new faces that it's clear that the timing was right. Congress was very prescient this time, and not just sort of running fast to catch up, to create a unique forum for the community to come together. Now, more and more, we are finding our membership interested in having this consortium be the voice of industry and help policymakers and the rest of the world, not just the people who know and understand and love it already, to appreciate what's going on. And a couple of years ago now, we went to the steering committee of QED-C and we proposed doing some kind of a state of the industry report. And they were extremely interested and supportive in seeing that done. And last year, we released the first State of the Global Quantum Industry snapshot. It was an assessment. We spent quite a lot of time thinking about what are the measures of a quantum economy. And we have defined those metrics. They're perhaps imperfect, but we feel they are measurable and they are something that we can track through time and see progress. So this year, we're really excited to be putting out the second annual State of the Global Quantum Industry Report. I want to give a shout out to Bob Sorensen, who's in the back of the room. Many of you know Bob for his contribution. Thank you, Bob. And to actually many others who helped, because I get a lot of questions, as I'm sure you do. What's quantum going to be good for? When are we going to have it? How big is it going to be? How many workers? And I have an opinion, but that's just one person's opinion. I like to go to the data. And so this report is going to really be helpful for all of us in communicating about our industry, to show the progress, to look ahead. We have a lot of estimates and projections that look out 2 or 3 years. And I think that's going to address some of the misconceptions that it's all way in the future and that we should all just sort of sit back and wait. No, now is the time. We need students getting into the field. We need companies stepping up and being part of the supply chain. We need the end users to start learning how this is going to impact their businesses. So hopefully, I'm sure actually, this report will be very helpful in communicating to all of those communities. So I'd like to, again, thank everybody who was part of the team that put this report together. I encourage you to look at it, read it, use it, share it. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Felbinger, Deputy Director of QED-C, who will give you a little bit more color and detail about this year's report. John.
So thank you, Celia. Thank you, Louisa. And welcome everyone here in the room and joining us online. It is my distinct pleasure to share with you QED-C's latest industry barometer. Just as the industry has been growing, our flagship report has also expanded. On your seats, you may notice the overview and methodology for our report. There are 3 additional volumes available on our website or using the QR code on the screen. We continue to publish this year our deep dives into the 2 principal quantum industry segments. Those are quantum computing and quantum sensing. And we include even deeper analysis this year. We have also introduced a section that we are looking at global trends. And the data we present across the board are current as of the end of 2025. We recognize that this is not the only report about the quantum industry. And our approach is to cite existing credible data where we can find it and to conduct original research to fill in the gaps. So thank you to our contributors who have compiled and analyzed all of this data for us, for the community, and to our partner associations who have helped to disseminate the market surveys. I will share with you some of this year's highlights and from my perspective, and then we'll be hearing from leaders in the government and from the industry about how these trends are informing their decisions. On to the results. The global quantum industry is transitioning from research to early commercialization, as evidenced by structural, financial, and supporting metrics that are captured in this report. Structurally, in the figure on the left, we classify organizations in the ecosystem, and we see the organizational prevalence of technology developers that we identify in the quantum stack, as well as their investors. Together, these total more than half of the organizations within the ecosystem. In contrast, we do note a modest share of end users, and we expect the ratio of end users to developers to grow by at least 2 orders of magnitude as the industry matures. So this is really a key structural metric to watch going forward. Financially, we observe continued revenue growth and strong forecasts, backed by record public and private investment in quantum this past year. We also observe an expanding workforce, layered with a shift in demographics away from research and development roles to more commercial functions like operations and business development. We lastly see an increase in merger and acquisition transactions across the industry. While this year's indicators are very encouraging, We are still in the early days of the quantum industry. Early adopters are working closely with quantum developers in arrangements often characterized as partnerships working toward a common goal rather than outright purchases. Government continues to play an outsized role, with the majority of quantum computing and quantum sensing companies reporting partnerships with government research and similar organizations. Today, the government role centers on funding as well as on collaborative development and infrastructure. As the industry and technology continue to mature, we expect to see public sector reposition itself as a customer for quantum products and services. Lastly, we see a significant share of companies remain pre-revenue, which are approximately a sixth of the quantum computing survey respondents and a third in the quantum sensing sector. Quantum technologies generally remain in the early stages of commercialization, as idealized in the figure on the right. Now we'll take a closer look at revenue. The quantum market is anchored in core segments of computing and sensing technologies. We forecast continued strong growth, reaching over $4 billion in quantum industry revenue in 2028. The bar charts show a series of revenue forecasts for the quantum computing segment on the left and the quantum sensing segment on the right. Each color represents an estimate compiled in a different year. For quantum computing and quantum sensing, we see evidence of growth that slightly exceeds our estimates and projections from prior years. Notably, the most recent survey results indicated no companies reported a decrease in revenue from 2024 to 2025. If we look at multiple forecasts for the same year, for example, the 4 bars of different colors in 2024 or 2025, we see relatively good alignment between prior forecasts and the revised estimates for annual revenue. This gives us good confidence in the methodology. The progress of the industry is further evidenced by an increasing share of companies exceeding $5 million in revenue for quantum products and services. That's 19% of the respondents in computing and 14% in sensing. We also see a decline in the firms reporting no sales to date. And we see expectations of double-digit revenue growth among most companies in quantum computing and quantum sensing. In addition to forecasting revenue, the report examines challenges that the industry must overcome in order to stay on track. Notably, there is market fragmentation in both the quantum computing and quantum sensing sectors. Quantum computing currently lacks a dominant technology or modality that would be analogous to silicon CMOS in the semiconductor sector. Quantum sensing also appears siloed by qubit technology as well as by application, which is evidenced by diverging views from the segment as a whole, which we've observed for the second year in a row. The ecosystem is scaling globally, as evidenced by over 7,000 quantum-engaged organizations that we were able to identify, with more than 550 of those pure-play companies focused on quantum development, occupying 6 continents and exhibiting an increasingly multinational character for the industry. As shown in the bar chart on the right, a majority of quantum computing companies report maintaining physical presence in multiple countries. This reflects both the global distribution of quantum talent as well as the strategic and practical necessities of cross-border engagement. There's also anecdotal evidence of a similar multinational character of the quantum sensing industry, based in part on its close association with the multinational aerospace industry. Public investment remains foundational to the industry and has been supported by nearly $60 billion in total government commitments, with nearly $13 billion added last year alone. Spain, Japan, and Switzerland are countries leading in terms of percentage growth and commitments to quantum. This signals that these countries are serious about fostering a domestic quantum industry. China remains a global leader in cumulative public funding for quantum, accounting for 27% of global commitments over time. Japan has risen significantly, followed by the US and the UK as the next highest public funders in absolute terms, not per capita. And that's captured in the table on the right, as well as in the report in detail. I will make a cautionary note as we move on to the private investment, and that is, you should beware making direct comparisons between public and private funding, as some of these public sector commitments may extend over years to even a decade, or may not materialize in time. Private investment is also growing, but in a more concentrated manner. We identified $4.9 billion in new venture capital investment in 2025, a near tripling in funding from 2024 levels, with just 25 more deals. There is disproportionate growth in later stage venture capital rounds, represented in pink, which are up 320% year over year, with just 6 additional deals, demonstrating capital concentration in proven quantum startups. Geographic concentration of early and especially later stage venture capital investment remains to be prevalent in the United States. New company formation continues at relatively lower levels than we saw when we started these surveys, as evidenced by generally declining startup creation since 2021. This hints at structural limitations or investor preference for lower risk later stage opportunities. This year's report introduces a section on global trends. For example, on the right, we find a statistical correlation between venture capital investment and company formation. Here we show year-over-year change in per capita venture capital investment by country and change in the pure play number of quantum companies, again, a percentage change. You can see the correlation as a clustering and a general trend in the chart up and toward the right. And the positive correlation suggests that venture capital conditions are closely linked with company formation and survival. However, if we look at the lower left quadrant, we see a presence of company growth despite declining venture capital investment, which indicates startup creation will be supported by other sources of capital, including increased public funding. We will continue to track this as it has implications for industrial policy. One of the key inputs to startups as well as established firms is a skilled workforce. Workforce growth reflects the broader industry expansion, with approximately 2,000 new hires at pure play quantum companies last year, and over 16,000 new quantum workers in the broader ecosystem. The European Union leads, with the United States as second in the number of workers at pure play quantum companies. Job creation appears to be accelerating. Job postings are a leading indicator for hiring activity, and this is supported by over 8,000 new job openings in 2025, representing 11% growth year over year, and higher growth in full-time roles than internships, a change from last year, demonstrating a commitment to sustained growth within companies. The 11% increase in job growth is in line with the 14% growth in quantum engaged or partial play organizations that we've identified. Across countries, the most active job markets are similar to last year, with approximately 3,000 openings in each of the US and European Union. The application focus is sharpening, particularly in quantum computing. We asked companies about their outlook for 2028. Nearly half of respondents prioritized quantum computing applications to chemistry or to materials science. Similarly, the top 2 end-user industries identified by nearly 40% of respondents demonstrate a concentration in domains closely aligned with quantum-native research and simulation. Other segments, including defense, remain meaningful participation, but broader ambitions, for example, transforming finance, appear to have been tempered for now. The quantum sensing landscape remains varied. Clocks and magnetometers account for the largest share of revenue in 2025 and looking ahead to 2028. Revenue expectations by industry are roughly evenly split between defense and commercial markets. The juxtaposition of concentration and breadth in quantum computing and quantum sensing applications suggests that near-term commercialization will be focused, but not strictly confined. Collaboration underpins progress, as evidenced by widespread multi-year partnerships between industry and government, as well as growing end-user partnerships among companies. Early adopters should continue to engage and shape the development of quantum technologies. They play a pathfinding role in the identification and validation of use cases with quantifiable advantage to their businesses. There's also a case for sustained public investment, closely coupled with efforts to build talent pipelines and shared infrastructure. Public investment will help to determine which geographic markets lead in this emerging and foundational technology. We have explored several of the key indicators and trends covered in this report, and I invite your questions during the break. I would also like to invite you to bring your questions and suggestions next Tuesday, when I will host a webinar joined by key contributors to the report for a member-exclusive discussion. So now we have a special opportunity to hear the perspectives and insights from leaders in the government. So thank you all, and I will hand the stage back to Louisa.
Thank you, John, for that very lucid overview of the key takeaways from the report. It's clear from what you said that quantum is transitioning from research. It's no longer an abstract future conversation. The decisions that are being made right now are going to be foundational to how this all develops. And obviously, you mentioned the government transitioning from a purely funding role to repositioning itself as a potential customer, which is, I think, a really interesting inflection point. So to that point, we're going to explore from a national and policy perspective in our government leadership forum. So I'm very pleased to welcome to the stage our guest speakers. Ethan Klein is the U.S. Chief Technology Officer. He helps shape national technology strategy and policy across critical emerging technologies, including quantum. He works across government, industry, and academia to align priorities, accelerate innovation, and ensure U.S. leadership in key technology domains. Erwin Giancondani is Assistant Director for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships at the National Science Foundation, where he leads the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, and is responsible for advancing key technology areas and strengthening the nation's research and innovation ecosystem. His work focuses on accelerating the translation of research into practical applications and fostering cross-sector collaboration and building regional innovation capacity across the United States. And Dario Gil, Undersecretary for Science at the U.S. Department of Energy. He's overseeing the department's science and innovation portfolio, including the National Laboratory System. He's been a leading voice in advancing large-scale scientific research and infrastructure, and he plays a central role in shaping national investments in quantum information science and other critical technologies. And to lead this discussion, I will welcome back to the stage Celia Merzbacher, QED-C's Executive Director, who will lead the conversation. Over to you, Celia.
Rearrange the group. Ethan and Erwin and Dario, sit anywhere you like. Thank you to all of you for agreeing to participate in the conversation. We want to keep it sort of informal, but we will use the next half an hour to give you the chance to share a little bit from the seat that you're in. As they say in Washington, where you stand depends on where you sit. And we just heard the introductions in your biographies where you're sitting these days. So we'll just go down the row and let you each take a few minutes to talk about what's going on from your perspective in government at high levels in the sort of quantum area and how it fits into the larger frame. Thank you, Ethan.
Great. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here with you all. I see some familiar faces and some new faces, and I think that very much speaks to the growing nature of this industry. It's wonderful, I think, just to highlight kind of the deep connections and partnerships between the U.S. government here and all of you working across your own respective domains. For folks' awareness, I work within the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. We have a mandate from the president to do 3 key objectives. The first is to ensure American leadership in critical and emerging technologies, quantum being one that's explicitly called out by the president in our mandate. The second is to revitalize the science and technology enterprise, recognizing, again, how how much innovation is occurring in the private sector today, and just trying to update a lot of the ways that the federal government engages with you all through the way that we fund research and development, towards the way that we share our exquisite research and development infrastructure, how we stimulate startup ecosystems, supply chains. And then the third mandate for us is about ensuring that all Americans are able to benefit from scientific progress and technological innovation. And I think that really speaks to looking on the slide before about all the amazing new jobs that are coming in a quantum industry. I think just viewing the, kind of the quantum sector is not just kind of narrowly focused. It needs to have the Q word in it, but rather it's this much larger ecosystem that contains everything from the material science that we're working on, fabrication technologies, lasers, this much larger kind of ecosystem supply chains. And so from where we sit, I think quantum is a perfect example of a technology that can really address all three of those key objectives. And so working across the folks on stage and a lot of our other colleagues across the interagency to kind of tighten up that integration between what we're doing on the R&D side, on supply chains, on workforce, and can talk more about that in a little bit.
Thank you. Why don't we go down the line and then we'll get into the conversation. Dario, share with us a little bit about what's going on at DOE.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. So at DOE, a couple of things I would highlight. One of the areas, and I'm sure many of you have heard about, is the Genesis mission. And we're very excited in the role that quantum is going to play as a central pillar of that objective. I mean, the core thesis of the Genesis mission is that we're in the midst of a computing revolution. Many of you are driving one of the big legs of this computing revolution, and that computing revolution is going to transform the practice of science and engineering in America. We ultimately seek to double the productivity and impact of America's $1 trillion a year R&D industry and ecosystem. And quantum is going to play an indispensable role. And within that, both through program efforts and sort of focus, we seek to realize working with all of you, error-corrected quantum computers as an example of the pillars, and making sure that they are applied towards scientific applications that are of relevance to the Department of Energy's mission. When I see the list of what we expect the implications, for example, of quantum computing to be, the first in the list are the very things that the Office of Science and the National Science Foundation, my friend, does. We are in the business of supporting chemistry research and materials research and material science research. In fact, the Office of Science is the nation's largest sponsor of research in the physical sciences. So we are the consumers of what you're creating, in one way to look at it. So we want to both see that the technology reaches those objectives and that we get to use it to drive breakthrough science that can transform the opportunities for our missions in terms of energy, discovery science, and national security. So I'm just thrilled about where the industry is right now. I think the next few years are going to be the most fun. For those of you who know me, I love quantum and spent a good chunk of my life working on it. So I think that's going to be the best years in the history of quantum information science and quantum computing. So I just cannot wait of what we're all going to achieve together. And I think we have a wonderful set of policies in the administration and driven by the president. We're making quantum an absolute top priority. And I think together we're going to drive incredible breakthroughs.
So good morning, everybody. It's great to be here, and it's great to be with my colleagues on stage from across the interagency. At the National Science Foundation, I would first say that I think we're really excited to be working closely with our colleagues at DOE, our colleagues at the White House, our colleagues across the interagency to be able to shepherd and drive some of these collaborations that I think are incredibly important to power the breakthroughs that we need to see in quantum information science and technology going forward. If you look at where we are today and you compare that to where we were 5, 7, 10 years ago, I think many folks in this room, Dario himself just sort of alluded to it, believe that we are at the precipice of something very powerful in quantum technologies going forward. And that cuts across sensing and networking and computation and so on. A lot of that is the result of breakthroughs that NSF, together with our colleagues in other agencies, have helped to pioneer through the investments that we've laid out over the course of the last many years. And so I think that when we think about our portfolio and the efforts that we're trying to pursue, it's really trying to build upon that and power that, drive that into the future as we go forward. So what are the research class investments that we need to be supporting that will help us unlock new breakthroughs and new technologies and capacities in quantum sciences going forward? What's the workforce that we need to be able to support that? I think we'll talk about that in more depth in just a little bit, Celia. But understanding that that workforce is, yes, researchers, but also the full spectrum. You know, I think we like to think of it as what's the ecosystem that we want to be able to enable at the end of the day. And that ecosystem cuts across researchers and technicians and practitioners and entrepreneurs. We saw the numbers of startups, for example, and venture capital investment on some of the slides earlier. So what is that full ecosystem of talent that we want to be able to enable at all levels and at all layers? And then I think the third piece of the puzzle for us is what's the infrastructure? So there's the Genesis mission and the incredible compute capacity that Dario talked about, and we'll talk more about on this panel. But across the spectrum, what are the variety of different test beds and platforms and other types of resources that we need to be able to enable the experimentation and the training of talent? And there's training not just in terms of being able to conduct experiments on those test beds, but also being able to assemble those test beds together. That's know-how, that's capability, that's capacity that frankly this country needs to ensure that we are in a leadership role on as we move forward. So those are some areas that I think we are really interested in at NSF. The last thing that I'll say is we are increasingly with my shop, the Technology Innovation and Partnerships Directorate at NSF, really focusing on what are the use cases that can drive and power some of the revolution that we're seeing in quantum today and tomorrow. So by that, I mean, yes, chemistry, material science, and so forth. What are some of those use cases that we stand to benefit in terms of greater resolution and precision that quantum sensing can enable, or greater compute that quantum and classical systems hybrid together can power? But it's also across the sectors of the economy. So how do I think about healthcare challenges? How do I think about the opportunity in the finance world and so forth? So what are those use cases that can power a revolution of R&D and workforce development and training that I think is so critical to not only unlock quantum, but also unlock and unleash the power of quantum in these different sectors across our economy? So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. And as we've said, I think we really appreciate the incredible partnership and support with our colleagues on stage and across the interagency to make this possible. And with you all, private industry is key as we think about those use cases, for example, as well.
Thank you. Thanks to each of you. You already spoke a little bit, Ethan, about the administration's priorities. So I'd like to, I guess, sort of, number one, expand and make sure everybody appreciates that while we have DOE and NSF here, it's really a whole of government action and effort that is coordinated by the National Quantum Coordination Office out of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that broader engagement across all of the different parts of government, in addition to the ones that are here today.
Yeah, very happy to. First thing I would note is, I served in the same office within the White House back during the first Trump administration. At that time, I think in 2017, 2018, we were the first administration to call out quantum information science in our R&D priorities that we send to all the departments and agencies as they're formulating, their versions for the president's budget request. And I would note we're back to doing exactly that in the R&D priorities that came out this last year that we sent to departments and agencies. And I'm sure you can envision that will continue through in the second administration. At the time, we had the first signing of the National Quantum Initiative. That was an amazing, time to double research and development funding. But towards what everybody, here has said and earlier this morning, we're beyond just kind of, funding the basic research. We need to continue doing that, but we need to advance now towards all the commercialization and application and identifying what those applications are and incentivizing more private capital to flow in. So I think from our perspective, we do coordinate. We have an amazing director for our National Quantum Coordination Office, Dr. Brad Blakestad, who I know many of you guys know and is a true asset for all of us, certainly within the White House and I think across the federal interagency. And we view it really through 5 different kind of priorities or 5 different lenses, 5 angles that we need to achieve if we are to lead in QIS. The first is the commercialization, the application piece. We need to do a good job partnering from the federal government side, identifying what those applications are, driving that forward and trying to accelerate timelines. And that's everything that you'll hear from Dario and from Erwin, the actions that their agencies are taking. And just, I think we have that shared mindset. The second piece gets to supply chains. And so again, it's a very broad kind of industrial base that we're going to need to support if we're looking to grow this industry. And that's all the different component technologies I mentioned before, I think towards materials, towards lasers, towards fabrication technologies. We're looking to support that, address that across the different agencies through different policy levers that we have. The third piece, and I think Erwin touched on it, is it's not just high-skilled STEM PhDs that we need for a quantum workforce. We need to both start, even earlier on in folks' careers or education to be aware that this is a potential kind of path in industry. But also, we really want to have folks that are, maybe going to college, maybe doing a 1-year, more hands-on training that are making them ready for the quantum workforce, and even, that technical kind of vocational skilling for amazing jobs that we truly believe will crop up as quantum continues to mature and to scale in supporting the industrial base on manufacturing. So we continue to work across, our colleagues at Department of Labor and Small Business Administration, looking at SBIR funding and the like to support all that. And then the last two pieces I would say as priorities that we coordinate across the interagency. One is on national security. Obviously, we talk a lot about the need to promote these technologies, but also to protect them. And that's something that can't be done by government alone. It can't be done by federally funded research and academia alone. It needs to have partners in industry on all that. So that's something that we continue to remain engaged on. And the last piece, again, is not everything can be done here in the United States alone. And so we partnership with our allies overseas, where they own, critical nodes in quantum supply chains, and quantum workforce is incredibly important. I was just over in London for a meeting of the Quantum Development Group, where that's exactly kind of, the topics at hand with some of our closest partners and allies. So I think those are, kind of the set, and we work with, our colleagues, again, I mentioned Labor, State Department as well, Department of Commerce, as well as DOE and NSF as two of our real champions. But the one message that I would just give to folks in the room is I truly don't believe there's ever been more kind of enthusiasm and champions for quantum than in this administration. And I think that's just something really to be excited about, and, we'll see what we can get done over these next couple of years.
Thank you. I'd like to dig down a little bit more on the promote and protect side. And I think everybody appreciates that quantum technologies are dual use, that they have both civilian and military or defense applications. And maybe I'll start with Dario, but maybe others want to mention their perspectives as well, because DOE has both the science side and also the national security side. And I know your job is on a daily basis working to oversee the science mission there. But perhaps you can share with us how you see these two parts of DOE working together. And then, if you want to say anything, Ethan, as well, you mentioned it already. And I do want to appreciate that Ethan mentioned a lot of agencies that when you're talking about science policy, you don't necessarily, have come to mind right away, the Small Business Administration, Department of Labor, and others. So I want to express a lot of appreciation for bringing in all of the parts of the ecosystem that are going to be critical, I think, to all of the companies in the room and online. So Dario, can you sort of go up a little bit from your Undersecretary for Science role and talk about the Department of Energy's view on behalf of your secretary, perhaps?
One of the things I have learned in the last year is that no one knows what the Department of Energy does. And I'm glad you're asking this question, because half of what the Department of Energy does is we run the National Nuclear Security Administration, and which is a huge effort and endeavor that builds and maintains the nuclear stockpile of the United States. There's a huge national security mission within the Department of Energy. There's a huge science mission, and there's a huge energy mission that is present. But those are the three things that the department does. And when we look at quantum obviously has great relevance to all three of our missions around that. And the history, for example, just to give you a relationship between high performance computing and the national security piece of the department, is that when the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was passed, it forbid the testing of nuclear weapons. But we got to ensure the safety of the stockpile of the United States nuclear arsenal. And a technical solution to be able to ensure that is to use simulation, right? Is to use high performance computers. So the reason why the Department of Energy has the world's best high performance computers is because through a combination of exquisite experimental facilities and simulation codes, we're able to guarantee that aspect of our national security, right? The ultimate guarantor, right, of the security of the United States. So when you look at that, there's a huge history, is my point, on the role of high performance computing for national security missions, And there's, of course, a huge history in the form of computational science and simulation for advancing science and for advancing energy. So that history is playing now in real time for AI, right? Where AI supercomputing capabilities are going to have a tremendous impact on the national security piece and on the science and energy piece. And it will happen in the same way for quantum, right? So you can be sure that the capabilities and the enablement of being able to do material simulation and chemistry simulation and all sorts of types of simulation that quantum is going to enable will have a profound impact, right, on both of our missions. So our strategy spans all three elements of energy, discovery science, and national security. And what that means in practice is across our national laboratories and across the research and infrastructure that we fund, all three of those areas are supported, right? So we have incredible teams in our, national security laboratories, Los Alamos and Livermore and Sandia, that are the forefront of quantum information science and working with many partners and algorithms, but so in our Office of Science labs, and of course in our applied energy labs. We operate 5 of the National Quantum Initiative centers across the National Laboratory Complex on that. And when we pursue scope on that is both enabling technologies and capabilities that will fulfill both our missions in terms of discovery and national security.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just add to Dario's comments? I think he said it beautifully in terms of DOE's footprint and portfolio. I just wanted to add that in the context of an agency like the National Science Foundation, we are not part of the national intelligence community explicitly, right? But it is important for folks to recognize that we do collaborate pretty closely with our colleagues at DOE, but also our colleagues at the Department of War and our colleagues in the IC to be able to understand what are some of the use cases that they have that could potentially be brought to bear in terms of the R&D that we're trying to support. We have over the course of the last several years, for instance, in a number of these areas, AI, quantum, materials, and so forth, fostered these relationships and collaborations because we also recognize at the end of the day that talent is not located just in one sector, right? Talent is incredibly distributed across academia and industry and our national labs and so forth. And some of the research that we're supporting on a day-to-day basis has those dual use implications as well. And so I think that in the context of that, these partnerships that we have with the interagency space, with the IC, with DOW, with DOE, et cetera, with mission-oriented agencies can be really powerful, both in terms of helping to shape some of the research directions that we're pursuing, but also in terms of being able to bring back the solutions that we're seeing emerging from the research investments that we're making to have the conversations and make those connections around dual use, right? And so I think that that's just part and parcel of what we do every day. It's what allows our program team at NSF, I think, to ensure the greatest success with the investment dollars that our taxpayers are entrusting us with.
Thank you. Ethan, did you want to add anything or shall we move on?
No, I think they covered it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I want to follow up with you, Erwin, on this topic of talent and workforce development. Growing a quantum-ready workforce is really important. I just was talking to someone from a university or about a university who was looking to hire 20 new quantum people at one university. I'm sure the DOE labs are also eager to bring on board and staff up people who are going to be contributing to the quantum work at their national labs. And then we've got all the industry who are also looking to hire skilled, relevantly educated workers. And of course, NSF is a workforce development agency in a sense. They invest in university research, which students are involved with, and then they graduate and they go out and take jobs in the sector. And so they have a real lever in a way to use to influence the skills and the education of students in real time. I want to underscore that Erwin is with the newest directorate at NSF, the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, which I was extremely enthusiastic and excited to see come into being because I see that as filling a
Past
much
tense,
needed.
or is that present tense also? You were extremely excited. You're
It's
still
still
excited?
am. Well, I was excited about its creation, and I'm equally excited about its evolution. And it's a natural touch point for QED-C. But I did want to sort of give you the opportunity to reflect on the role of NSF and how we can get from where we are today to the equilibrium, which eventually we will presumably reach, where we have a good pipeline of talent to fill all these jobs.
Sure. So, it's been commented on. Ethan talked about it a little bit. Dario talked about it a little bit. There are some threads in the conversation that we've had just in the last 20, 30 minutes here that tie together. And the two threads that I want to tie together intentionally here in response to this question, Celia, is sort of industry engagement, but I would broaden that a little bit to sectoral engagement together with the talent that we need, right? I think that, we were delighted yesterday, for example, out of NSF to be able to announce 2,599 to be exact, graduate research fellows that we awarded as part of our FY26 portfolio, with great thanks to the support of the administration and our colleagues on Capitol Hill as well. So we are, to your point, the agency that's trying to drive. Many of those folks are in spaces like chemistry and materials, and other domain areas, computing, sensing, et cetera, that are critical to the lifeblood of the quantum ecosystem that we're trying to ensure is built out here in the United States and stays here in the United States. Having said that, I think those are largely graduate students. They're going to get PhDs. They're going to be trained as research scientists. They may go to academia. They may go to industry, et cetera. They may go to the national labs and so forth. I think what we need to acknowledge is that it really is an ecosystem approach to the talent creation and talent nurturing that we need to be able to do in a space like quantum. And to be able to do that effectively, you need to understand what are the needs of the employers at the end of the day, to be able to drive, I think, the instructional offerings, to be able to drive the experiential opportunities that our students have and so on, such that they can be best positioned for the jobs that are available and for jobs on day one. I think we've all heard so many times that, we have a student who gets a degree or a certificate or a stackable credit or what have you. They end up in a job, and the company has to spend the first year retraining them for the needs of that company on a day-to-day basis. And so what we're trying to do is short circuit that process at some level to be able to understand what are the needs up front, and how do we sort of re-architect, re-engineer the way in which we're training talent, and recognize that it's not all degree based. There are certificate programs, there are stackable credits. A lot of this comes through, I think, actual exposure, on the job training, internships and apprenticeships and so forth. How do we make all of that possible? And that requires, I think, real partnership. It requires the partnership to enhance our understanding, to then inform the investments and the programs that we might fund. And that's what we have done over the course of the last several years, particularly in the last year and a half, focusing around experiential learning as an investment that we have, focusing on, through our regional innovation engines effort, for example, how do we get folks in communities around the country that are the hotspots of quantum information science today? How do we get talent there exposed to it so that they can actually pivot from the job they're in to potentially a higher skill, higher trade, higher paying job that could be exciting to them and to their families, and their ability to put food on the table and so forth in the years ahead. So that's how we think about this. Is it really requires an intentional partnership between and across sectors to be able to drive the needs. I think we can spend all of our time talking about new curricula and new instructional material. It's only impactful if it's relevant to what the needs are of the jobs that are out there from industry going forward. And I use industry loosely when I say that, including hiring that's done in national labs, hiring that's done in academia, et cetera.
Thank you. We are out of time, so I'll skip all these other questions that I had. Well, for another panel, perhaps. I want to thank you all. Maybe I'll just let everyone kind of close out with their answer to the question, what is the thing that you're sort of most excited about in 2026? We just had a snapshot, a bit of a look back and a look ahead with some estimates for the future, but where do you see us being 1 year from now when we get together again? What do you think is going to happen between now and then? You want to start, Ethan? Or
go.
What I want the most is please deliver breakthroughs. That's the only thing I care about. So there are many elements of it, but look, in the next 2 years, I mean, on the computing side, somewhere between 150, 250 logical qubits, and scientific applications that go with this. It will do wonders for all of you and for the industry. Just let's all focus and deliver that.
So I'll take a slightly different tack at that. I agree with Dario's comment. Slightly different tack is we have a room full of folks today, a standing room only full of folks who are excited and I presume passionate about the topics that we're discussing today, right? What we need to do is we need to galvanize the next generation of talent to be able to do that. And I'm excited about the prospects of us to be able to do so through the help of everyone in this room going forward.
Yeah, I totally want to echo what you heard from both Dario and from Erwin. Breakthroughs is like the easiest answer for all of us when we are advocating for American scientists, for technologists here in the US, for advocating for innovation that's occurring in the private sector, about why it's so important that we have these new models for public-private partnership to get access to the R&D infrastructure for us to be able to support those ecosystems and place-based innovation, and then to actually deliver on that for the American people. I think we love in the White House speaking about how important these critical and emerging technologies, quantum, very much included in that as being the drivers of economic growth of our national security and why it's so important to invest. And there's no better kind of, answer response to that than seeing, the innovations that are coming from you all, from growing your companies, from expanding overseas, from building supply chains here in the United States, and delivering breakthroughs and training the next generation of the quantum workforce.
Thank you. And as a sort of former scientist in the lab, I will echo what you all said, which is if we get this technology in the hands of researchers, they will start experimenting, they will do discovery work. They don't care if it's, a little flaky and they have to reboot now and then or whatever. That's okay when you're doing experiments in lab. Maybe not so good if you're managing your systems on the electric grid or something that requires a little bit more resilience. So I hope between now and next year, we see a real uptick in the access that you talked about, Ethan, and others as well, in getting the systems where they need to be so that when those experiments are done, we get meaningful results that then flow out into all kinds of applications, many of which we haven't thought of yet. So stay tuned. Thank you, all of you, for spending time with us today. And thank you all for joining us. And I will turn it back over to Louisa.
Hi, everyone. If you could take a look to your right, and if there is an open seat next to you, please slide down into that open seat to allow some of your quantum colleagues to take a seat in these open chairs. Thank you. Oh, still. Is this mic on? Oh, great. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. That was such a terrific panel. And I love Dario's comment that the next few years are going to be fun. So to talk about some of that, we have a great industry leaders panel. I'd love to invite just all the speakers to come and take their seats, and then I'll introduce you when you're up on stage. So can everyone, Joab and Alan and Matthew and Juliet and Elitza, grab your seats and we'll start. So we have this incredible panel. I'll start with Juliet Peyronet at the end. She's the U.S. General Manager at Alice and Bob, focused on fault-tolerant architectures and commercialization. I will tell you that the best way to signal at a quantum conference that you're not a quantum scientist is to say to Juliet, so how did you come up with the name of Alice and Bob? So that's like, well, let me tell you about quantum physics. And next to her is Elitza Kioseva. she's a director at NVIDIA who works at the intersection of quantum AI and high performance computing. And she's doing some really fascinating work. Joab Rosenberg is an investor and an ecosystem strategist at Deep 33. And he was a philosopher before he was a physicist, or a physicist turned philosopher. I'm not sure. But just absolutely fascinating. Matthew Kinsella is CEO of Inflection, which is scaling quantum from lab to real world deployment. And Alan Baratz is CEO of D-Wave, which is one of the earliest companies in commercialization of quantum systems. So we have a lot of great perspectives here on the panel. And my hope is to cover three things in our conversation. Where the industry is today from the point of view of the leaders who are really on the front lines here, what changes over the next couple of years, and what role policy is going to play in shaping that trajectory, responding a little bit to what we heard from our public sector leaders just a few minutes ago. So, we have this great snapshot going back to the report. And what I think the data shows is that this is, we're still very early, but we're accelerating. There are now over 7,400 organizations engaged in quantum. It's a very global, competitive, and capital-intensive industry. But we're at this inflection point where the revenues are still very small and the industry is still pretty pre-commercial, but there is this shift happening with revenues growing at about 30% annually, government funding surging, and venture capital more than doubling. So I looked at the projection section of the report, and it projects a possible $3 billion industry by 2028. And I thought, oh, that's pretty impressive. But I did check into comparable industries about the same size. So that would put quantum at the size of esports, smart irrigation systems, it's still smaller than meal kits or pet insurance. So just for context. But what I'm so interested in really is the significance of this industry as it unlocks other parts of the economy and of science. So it's not just about the size. It's really about the role that it's going to play in supercomputing and in research and as we heard, national defense as well. So maybe, Alan, I could start with you because you're selling systems and applications into the market. So I'm curious where you're finding customers, what they actually want to pay for today, and what isn't yet translating into real demand.
Sure. So am I on?
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thanks to all of you for the opportunity to be here today. I very much appreciate it. We're in a fairly unique position in the quantum industry in the sense that we're the only what I'll call dual platform quantum computing company. So we bring two classes of quantum computers to market. We bring what's called annealing quantum computers to market, and then gate model quantum computers to market. We're actually the only company in the world that has commercial annealing systems. And those are the systems that are commercially viable today. Those systems are in use by customers across a variety of different industries, BASF for chemical production scheduling, NTT Docomo for cell tower resource optimization, Ford Otosan for automotive body manufacturing optimization. And they are actually in use on a daily basis as a part of their business operations. But that's because annealing quantum systems are an easier technology to work with. We're at the point where we're at over 4,000 qubits. We are able to deliver a significant ROI in terms of better solutions faster to hard optimization problems, which represents many of the important challenges that businesses face today. So it is annealing that has allowed us to become commercial, and our revenue basically tripled between 24 and 25. On the gate model side, which is where pretty much everybody else in the industry is focused, D-Wave included, we're still very much in the R&D phase. And so, when we talk about the revenues that are expected maybe 2 years or 3 years from now, I think that that is an indication of the fact that these systems really are not yet commercial. They're mostly capable of supporting research experimentation. So, they're being purchased by academic institutions or national labs, maybe research departments within larger corporations, but really primarily focused on research experimentation. And that's why, maybe we're not, the market in 28 will not be larger than, online meals or whatever it is that you were talking about. But I think we all understand that if we look out maybe 10 years from now, that market, that addressable market will be much, much larger. And that's where really all the opportunity lies for gate model systems.
Great. Well, maybe to you, Matthew, you've seen this both as an investor and as an operator who's scaling the company. What are investors most excited about right now? And, is the investment kind of building ahead of the demand? Is this, how are you sorting sort of like the hype from the real opportunity here?
Great question. Well, also, I will echo Alan in saying it's great to be up here with you all. And thanks everybody for being here. And Lucius, thank you for hosting the panel. I was indeed the first investor in Inflection going back to 2018. And I spent 18 years at a firm called Maverick Capital, where I was on the public equity side of the investment firm, and then on the venture capital side of the firm for the next 9 years. I was one of the partners running our venture capital efforts. So I do have more of a history in venture and investing than quantum, although I've been on the quantum journey for a long time. I was reflecting on some of the market sizes you were giving and thinking, are any of those going to change the world as much as quantum? And at one point in time, I think the Kinsella family household thought meal delivery was indeed going to change our world at least, but that tapered off pretty quickly. And I can see why it's stabilized at that $3 billion level. It's been fascinating to see the industry and the investor's perspective on the industry evolve over the course of the last 8 years. When I first invested in Inflection, it was very hard to really get anyone's attention on quantum. And if I look at my venture partnership as a microcosm, this was kind of like the Inflection investment amongst all of our other investments was kind of a bit of a black sheep. And I was the partner who loved this company, was always advocating to invest more. But the rest of the firm was sort of like, I don't know, this seems like a long time away. And I think that's a good microcosm of how the investment community was thinking about quantum in general 8 years ago. It's completely flipped at this point in time, where now all investors are trying to understand what are the implications of quantum over the course of the next decade. And if there's one thing investors love, it's to pattern match and say, we've seen this movie before. So I think a lot of investors are looking at the way that AI has played out over the course of the last decade or so and saying, is quantum that next tectonic shift that's going to take place? And I voted with my feet 2 years ago to come do this full time. I squarely believe that. Very similarly to the way Alan's running his company, Inflection has sort of two parts to our business as well. And we have a quantum sensing piece of our business as well as the quantum computing part of the business. And the thesis from when I first invested in the company was that this same underlying neutral atom technology can address both. And so we can monetize today in the quantum sensing world as we get closer and closer to whatever it is, 2028, 2029, when we get gate-based fault-tolerant quantum computers that can do useful things. And I think the investment community is very interested in both of those types of opportunities, but it's clear that it's the quantum computing opportunity that everybody is pattern matching to AI and the most excited about. So succinctly, huge change from an investor perspective. Whether they actually really understand what quantum is more than they did 8 years ago, I'm not super convinced on that, but they do know it's going to be important and they are paying attention. So I'll leave it at that.
Great. And can I just ask you to give us an example of, on the sensing side, where you're finding your market, what kind of sensors there is a commercial appetite for right now?
Sure. I'll give you 2 examples. And so the way I think about the neutral atom platform is it's useful across this wide continuum. And I kind of think of like a maybe an exponential curve, where at the upper right-hand corner of that exponential curve is the gate-based fault-tolerant quantum computer that can do all these amazing things we're excited about. But there's these cascading curves that come off of that based on the same underlying technology, and they kind of go from most simple, not simple at all, but simple in the sense of quantum technologies, to most complex, which would be a computer. And so the most commercially advanced product we have to offer is a quantum atomic clock. And that's kind of the simplest thing you can do from a neutral atom perspective. Again, still very complex. And so that can keep time about 1,000x more precisely than classical atomic clocks. And now, why is that important? All of us here have heard about GPS denial. GPS is something we've become incredibly reliant upon from a society, from a global society. And there's a lot of really important things that come down to us from GPS, but actually what it ultimately is a time distribution system. And the timing is useful for a lot of things. One of those is navigation, but another is just synchronization of critical assets. And that could be, you know, the RF network, the electricity grid, the data centers, the financial markets all rely on GPS for a precise timing stamp. And that is becoming increasingly not reliable. And so the ability to replace some of that reliance on GPS with something local and unspoofable is gaining a lot of traction. And that echoes everything I just said on the commercial side with the military side, because the military is incredibly reliant on GPS. And I'll give you one more example that's maybe even a little more tangible, because we just launched it into space 2 days ago. Is we have been supplying the International Space Station with quantum systems since 2018. And you can think of that as a proving ground for whether quantum systems are going to be useful in space. And it indeed proves that it's proved they will be. And so we're working on something called the Quantum Gravity Gradiometer program with NASA right now, where we're sending up a quantum gravity gradiometer into space, which will be in a satellite. It will orbit the Earth. It will take measurements of gravity on the Earth's surface with extreme precision, and you can infer a lot of very interesting things that are happening both on and below the Earth's surface from changes in gravity. And this is replacing a mission that's been up there for 20 years called the GRACE mission, which has been using classical technologies to sense gravity on the Earth's surface.
Fantastic. So you're monetizing precision. I love that.
I like that too.
Yeah. Juliette, so your work is going back to the breakthroughs comment earlier. I mean, this is part of your work, error correction, right? And that's so essential here to making these quantum systems reliable enough for real world and commercial use. So talk to us a bit about how we're going to get there. And is this going to be like a major step change moment for the industry where we wake up one day and there's ChatGPT and everyone's like, holy cow? Or is this kind of a more gradual evolution? And how close are we over the next couple years to getting to that enough error correction to be commercially useful?
Yeah, first, I want to thank the organizer for inviting me today. So at Allison Bob, we really focus on making fault tolerance scalable and making sure that we can have those devices available as fast as we can. And when you look at where the ecosystem is today, we had a fantastic breakthrough coming from the community with first demonstrations of logical qubits. And it's really good signals that we're heading into the right direction, but there's still a lot of work to be done to engineer those systems at scales. Good news is that we're past the physics developments and past I would say, the de-risking of the fundamental physics. And we now have these problems as a community to build those large-scale systems. And I think in terms of timeline, we've seen that as a community, we try to extract value from NISQ, like those noisy intermediate scale quantum computer. To some extent, I think we are reaching some sort of conclusion with those devices. Doesn't mean that there's no research going on still with them. It's just that we're in a transition phase where everyone is really switching their gear toward fault tolerance and making sure that when researching application, we are really having these error correcting devices in mind. And we are seeing it through the interest of the US government towards those fault tolerant machines and making sure that they are helping to push forward the industry to deliver this system as fast as they can. And I would say in terms of timeline, we are seeing that the first or the next breakthrough around error correction will be those first systems that will deliver scientific value. So being able to compute applications that are today impossible to compute with classical devices, but that still remain relevant to a very niche science community with machines that span between 100 to 200 logical qubit. And if you look at vendors' roadmap, like people are expecting to have such machine as soon as next year. We don't know if these will be enough to make these breakthrough, but it's a matter of years and no longer a matter of decades. Then in terms of adopting the technology for the broader community, making sure that we have our like ChatGPT moment, I think we still have a little bit of time to reach that moment, because there's still a lot of work that needs to happen on the hardware for scaling the devices, but also on the application to have those killer apps for the industry, and making sure that we have a bigger and bigger community and a workforce that really focuses on these applications for enterprises is key, and making sure that we have those partnerships as well. So I would say for scientific compute, like at the more like the basic science level, like those applications are going to come very, very soon. To make it more mainstream, like we're still years ahead.
And Joab, you've worked across the quantum ecosystem as an investor and an advisor. So you're seeing how different companies are progressing. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of any patterns about which companies are making progress and which are still, you know, sort of a nice science project, but maybe not quite getting there to prime time. And what are you seeing as the main constraints? Are they technological, scientific? Are they capital? Are they workforce? What's your take on where we are?
Yeah, I'll join my colleagues in thanking everybody who organized it and the excellent report that was just published, which I find very interesting. And I must say also proud as an Israeli. If you've seen last year, the Israeli companies took $500 million in private investments out of $5 billion under a war and terrible conditions. So I had to say that. We are a US-Israeli fund with partners in LA, New York, and in Israel. So we see quite a lot of companies. We invest globally, so we also see European companies. I think from an investor point of view, which is very different from the government one, we need to show profit to our investors within a decade. So for us, the revenue parameter that you mentioned at the beginning is really, really important, because if we want to see liquidation and we want to IPO, we'll speak about specs in a moment. We need to see revenues of 100 million, 200 million, depending on the market. So that's crucial if we look like only a decade from now. The government can do investments. I used to work for the Israeli government for 25 years. You can do investments for 40 years ahead. You should, but the private market is different in that sense. So I think the easiest now are the hardware companies. So you can see the computer coming up and you see the scale is coming, and people are selling computers already for quite big checks. So in that sense, I think we see companies going public. We had incredible 2 days for the public market. I do agree with Matt that most of the public market do not really understand. You can see the volatility, and you can see that it's almost fully correlated. So whenever there's a big announcement, everything goes up, everything goes down when Jensen is saying it's 15 years away. And also there's no differentiation between a software quantum company, a sensing quantum company, a quantum computer, or quantum components. So I think the public market will get there and is getting there because they're pouring more and more money. The private sector has more people doing it for longer time. Not many physicists as investors, but still people get the understanding. So I think hardware is kind of easy, both the quantum computing, like the full stack computers, but also hardware components in silicon photonics or in cryostats or control systems and so on. I think at the moment, the quantum software to me is more of a question in terms of the revenue. So there's a lot of reasons to start early, as corporations and as private companies to get your place and your brand known. But my main question to any software company that is coming to me, and I've seen many of them in the last year, is tell me what you could do that would be really commercially valuable within 2 years' time, because then I have a reason to start investing now. If it's within 8 years that you start bringing revenue, you will not get to the IPO in 10 years. And I think that question is still very difficult because you need people who know the use case very well, whether it's finance or chemical materials, and you need people who know quantum algorithms, and you don't have the hardware yet to play with it because you really need like 1,000 physical qubits or 100 logical qubits, whatever, to really be able to show the algorithms. It's not an abstract mathematical question. So I think this differentiation still holds, but my own guess is that next year we will have the size of computer that Dario Gil mentioned earlier, and therefore a year later or even next year we will see the first commercial use cases in production, not in innovation department, but in production.
Well, I think he said, what, 150?
Logical qubits.
100. So does everyone agree this is coming within a year? Show of hands?
No,
No?
no,
Okay.
but,
No? Okay.
no, but everything you just said is related to gate model quantum computers.
Indeed.
Annealing hardware exists today. People can write software and develop applications on it that are actually useful.
Well, I just have to say, like, coming closer to the date, we need to better define what we mean by logical qubit, because people mention logical qubits and they don't exactly say, like, what's the error rate. But I don't know if everybody noticed already, like IonQ just came up today with a redefined roadmap where they promise next year 800 logical qubits. And they do mention the error rate and they change the terminology. They're not using these algorithmic qubits, confusing ones. So they're speaking about the real logical qubits. And we can speak about neutral atoms and superconducting qubits. I think it's within reasonable time frame. Again, we can argue about logical qubits a lot.
Well, I love that last night at the reception, Joab, you said like you feel like we're in the 1940s, where computing was in the 1940s, where we're still, figuring out what this industry is going to be. And it's really exciting. I wanted to bring in Elitza because NVIDIA really sits at the intersection here of computing, supercomputing, infrastructure, classical computing. Talk about how you see where quantum fits into the stack today and where you see that going. And I think in our earlier conversation, I think you told me that the future is hybrid. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, thanks, Louisa. It's great to be here. Indeed, the future is hybrid. Also, the presence is hybrid. Everyone pays attention to what is happening. And yesterday, also NVIDIA released for the first time the first open AI models for quantum computing. It's a model family called iSync, and we have currently 2 models there. But we do believe that AI supercomputing and quantum computing are very much needed for each other. So we need AI supercomputing to operate quantum computers, to calibrate them, to design them in the first place through accelerated simulations of the QPUs. So for the whole, if people consider the whole quantum computing stack, we need AI supercomputing across the whole stack, all the way up to the applications level. I personally work on applications, so that is the team that I lead at NVIDIA. And since, of course, the Genesis mission, where one of the challenges is explicitly stated AI for quantum algorithm discovery, it really feels like the whole community is very much aligned that AI is needed to accelerate the development and adoption of quantum computing, just to get us there. On the other side, of course, the future is hybrid because quantum computers will be serving as an accelerator within a classical supercomputer. There are problems we are known for which there are algorithms with exponential scaling versus the classical ones, or with super quadratic scaling. So we do know that there are these challenges in materials design, let's say modeling chemical systems, obviously encryption, etc., that are never possible to be solved on a classical computer, regardless of the size of the quantum computer or the time that you have at scale. So we do know the golden use cases for quantum computing, and quantum computers will be integrated within a classical supercomputer, and there will be an accelerator. So they'll be solving the part of the problem that is really, really hard, and the rest, and including the operation of the quantum computer, will be enabled by classical computing.
And how do you see the sort of biggest milestones in what you're working on right now? Like, what's the next big thing you're working towards?
Yeah, I very much agree with what was mentioned. Now, there is a very, very big focus on hardware development and on achieving error correction. Indeed, what Joab said is so true. I think we will see these announcements of 150 logical qubits, maybe 200, maybe 800, right? The question is, I think we are still in this area where everyone has a different definition of what's a logical qubit and how good a logical qubit is, the same way like we have for the physical qubits, right? We have very different performance metrics for the physical qubits. It will be, I think, similar for the logical qubits, at least in the next year or two. But we are going to see early devices with fault-tolerant operations, with logical qubits. And this is fantastic, right? We need the development on the hardware level in order to justify the use cases that we are trying to push. And after this kind of initial hurdle of realizing small scale, early fault-tolerant devices, it's very important to continue working on applications. And it is really fantastic to see hardware roadmaps by every quantum company, right? But we don't have application roadmaps. And I think people are starting to get aware of this kind of gap, and that applications and algorithms have been a little bit understudied over the last several years. And this is something that we need to change and address. There was a paper only last Friday by the Google team and collaborators and Atomic. So there are also some kind of results that show us that with one paper, with one research coming out, we can bring these requirements for fault-tolerant applications by decades. So I think ultimately the breakthroughs would come from working on algorithms and on applications.
Alan, to go back to the commercial piece and looking forward now to where this industry is headed, you talked about some of the applications you're already a part of in terms of optimization of various processes for existing companies. When you look forward to the next couple of years, where do you think your customers are going to be? What other systems will you help optimize as this technology improves?
So annealing quantum systems are, in some sense, native optimization engines. They're very, very good at solving optimization problems. And that's a broad class of problems. That's everything from workforce scheduling to manufacturing optimization to autonomous vehicle routing to last mile routing. I mean, frankly, most of the important hard problems that businesses need to solve are, in fact, optimization problems. Annealing quantum computers are very well suited to that. There's actually a body of evidence that would indicate that gate model systems will not be able to deliver speed up on optimization problems. Now, there's some more work that is going on here, and maybe that will change. But for now, there's strong evidence that that's not the domain of gate model systems. The domain of gate model systems is differential equations, quantum chemistry, materials design. Those are the things that I think gate model systems are going to enable for the world, and those are very, very important applications. I mean, we talk about forever lasting batteries, designer drugs. These are things that can drive significant benefit and significant value, and they are the domain of gate model systems. But we are years away. I mean, I think a roadmap is worth the paper it's written on. Sorry, especially when it was just published. I think we still have some very significant scientific research and engineering challenges to get to fully error-corrected, scaled gate model quantum computers. I don't think we're going to be there a year from now or 2 years from now, but we will get there. And when we get there, we'll be able to do some amazing things.
Matthew, so back to kind of looking forward, in the realm of quantum sensors, you talked about this incredible story of, what you're doing in space, but where do you see the sort of the growth opportunity in sensors? And I think you had mentioned to me earlier something around replacement cycles of different technologies. And I wonder if you could also talk about that.
Absolutely. So if we're talking about quantum computing working alongside AI and unlocking brand new market opportunities, that it's hard to even predict what those will look like over time. But I do agree with Alan, it'll likely be in material science and drug discovery and the types of things that are quantum mechanical in nature. It's a little bit more simplistic to size the market opportunity for some of the quantum sensing opportunities, because in many ways, they're doing a lot of the same things that classical technologies can do, just with orders of magnitude improvement. And so you could go and size the precision clock market, or you could go and size the traditional RF antenna market, or you can go and size the inertial sensing market and say, okay, if you came to market with a product that was 1,000 times better, could you disrupt that market? And could you take your fair share of that market? And so the way I think about the opportunity on the quantum sensing side of things, it's a little bit almost easier for investors to grasp, because they can see market sizes, they can see existing companies addressing those markets, and then they could imagine a world in which you come in with a much better product that will start to disrupt those classical markets, but then also start to enable brand new applications because of the improvement in precision. And so that's kind of how I think about the sensing opportunity is whereas quantum computing is going to layer on top of and be deeply, deeply connected with existing classical computing technologies. They'll be very collaborative, as Elisa was saying. I think quantum sensing is more of your traditional replacement cycle.
And where do you see the next big opportunities for quantum sensing?
It's across really three broad buckets. I see a huge opportunity in the quantum timekeeping world. I see a huge opportunity in the ability to disrupt classical RF communications. So we've been using very similar RF technologies for 120 years or so. They work very well for for many, many, many use cases, but there's some problems with it. Like if you want to receive a very long wavelength signal, you need a very, very big antenna. Quantum RF technologies can start to break that correlation, where you can start to receive those low frequency, long wavelength signals with very small devices. And so those opportunities are huge. And in fact, that might be the area we're feeling the most curiosity and demand pull for that type of quantum sensing technology. And then I'd mentioned that quantum gravity gradiometer program we're working on. That's a subset of the broader inertial sensing market, so sensing the forces around you. And quantum has a very big role to play in that over time, to be able to sense not just gravity, but all of the inertial forces to help with navigation.
And so this is navigation, or are there other applications if you're not an astronaut?
This could be navigation on the ground. And so this could be, not having to use GPS to navigate around the world. You now have sensors that are so precise that they do not drift, and you can move throughout the world or under the sea without having to access the trilateration from GPS. And so there's real world applications here for self-driving cars, et cetera. Now, we're not there yet where we're providing sensors that can do that, but that is where it's heading with the precision levels that quantum can bring.
Very cool. Joab, as an investor and someone who's looking at the future of this industry, if you had a bunch of Fortune 500 executives in the room, which industries would you tell, like, you should be really paying attention to quantum, because either it could really help you or disrupt your industry down the line?
Well, I think there's quite a consensus on that at the moment. So certainly cybersecurity is part of that. That I think is quite well known by now by the professionals. Then there's all of the computational chemistry and simulations, from drug discovery to climate calculations to material science, batteries, and so on. Then down the line, you have finance, both for optimization problems, but even later for option pricing, quantum Monte Carlo, and so on. And there are many others, but I think for me, and that's like the main question of investing in an existing market like sensing, where everybody knows the size of the market and what share you can take and what a more precise meter would do, to the quantum computing, where we have these notions of where the first applications will come from. But I always say, given the analogy of the 1940s, or if you'd like, if you're more optimistic, 1950s or 60s, I think if you go to Johnny von Neumann and ask him, what would be in 80 years the most popular application of the maniac computer that you're building for encryption and for atomic bombs, he would never say TikTok, right? There's no chance. So I think in that sense, people need to realize that quantum computing is not the next generation of your laptop. So we got used to think of this, okay, I have twice better chip from Intel, I have 10 times better, I have a smaller one on my iPhone. I think it's opening a whole area that we still do not appreciate, and there will be new applications we couldn't think of for two reasons. First of all, the developers are starting to work only when you give them the hardware. So there are the abstract mathematical proofs, which are interesting for mathematicians, but algorithmic developers, they start working when you give them the keyboard. And then we've seen like amazing breakthroughs when Google just started to look at elliptical curved codes, just came out. So as soon as you have the hardware, we will see a lot of innovation. This is just impossible now, so we cannot really imagine what people will do with it.
So we have a few minutes left, and I did want to turn to reality checking or pressure testing some of the comments made by the policy panel earlier. I'd love to hear from, maybe I'll start with you, Matthew, because I know you have some strong feelings on this, but this is obviously a sector that's had a lot of support from government in various ways. But as we're sort of moving from research to commercialization, what do you see as the gaps, and what do you think is the best role for government right now?
Well, I think Undersecretary Gill and other members of the administration are doing a really honestly a great job in helping to bring this technology out into the world, and the way they're thinking about it is different than it's been in the past. Where in the past it's been sort of I think actually in a session this morning, Undersecretary Gill called it kind of peanut butter spreading around different basic technologies for quantum. But what they're doing now is saying we need these systems up and running. We need them in data centers, and that's what we're going to fund. Like we're not going to fund best efforts. We're going to fund let's get a system out there. And I do think what the UK announced about a month ago was a very interesting implementation of that, where they are pursuing these quantum missions in which there are these phases. And so if you just look at what they're doing with quantum computing, they're going to pick 10 companies, they're going to fund them with a certain amount of capital, and they'll have different milestones that you need to meet. And then at the end of this, once you get to the levels that make this commercially useful, they've allocated a certain amount to procure these systems. And so from someone who's allocating capital, it's helpful to know that there is something you're shooting for that you can invest capital behind and know that there will be a buyer. Now, that's actually not the way the capitalist market works that much, and so it's a nice to have there, but ultimately it's on us to make these systems so useful that they're flying off the shelves and you don't need the government support. And I think the government's role right now is helping get the industry there, but ultimately it's going to have to play out in a capitalist way.
Elisa, talk a little bit about the Genesis mission and how that is unfolding from someone who's a part of it on the private sector side.
It has been a great drive for people to really start paying attention, because we have been, of course, our position as NVIDIA and how we engage in quantum computing as a platform provider. This is what we do also in every vertical, in every industry, not only in quantum, but we like to build products and to put them in the hands of the researchers, the industry, to use them to achieve their goals. So by kind of becoming an industry driving force and an industry growth factor, this is what also enables NVIDIA to succeed in that industry. So we have had this position that supercomputing and quantum computing are not competing technologies, but they are enabling each other technologies. So the Genesis mission and the way it is framed, that we want to use AI, supercomputing for scientific discoveries and breakthroughs, really fits into our strategy and our mission. And in particular, also for quantum computing, the way it has identified two challenges. So one of them is the algorithms one, which I mentioned. and the other one is to build actually quantum computers. So this encompasses, again, the whole quantum computing stack, from simulation, calibration, compilation, transpilation, and so on. So because of that, we are very broadly engaged with many teams that are applying for the Genesis mission. We feel that with our position and with the products that we build and with our whole strategy in quantum computing, this is a place where we can really enable many teams very broadly.
And I wonder, Juliette, where do you think the most helpful role for government is right at this moment as you're trying to make this breakthrough?
Yeah, so I would say in the US, we are seeing that the Genesis mission is really the catalyzer around like making sure that we have these quantum computer hosted in user facilities. But there are a lot of other initiatives that the government are supporting, mainly to make sure that we do have an ecosystem that's being built around like making sure that these machines are useful, because we, as a hardware quantum vendor, we also rely a lot on the existing scientific community to help us make those breakthroughs. Like, we can't do everything by ourselves. So supporting the community through the NSF programs and so on is really useful to make sure that we are building a village around quantum computing and not just making sure that we have those machines that are hosted. We have to apply them to so many different fields. We don't have, as a hardware vendor, all the knowledge and expertise in all of these different like scientific domains. So making sure that the different scientific domains that will be impacted by quantum also take these topic into their core objective, are not just I don't want to say distracted, but focused on AI, because it's true that AI is here today, but quantum is coming fast, as like in the next few years, as we were just mentioning. So we want to make sure that by the time the hardware is there, there is a community that will be there to leverage them. Now, in terms of what's the pain point for a vendor today is hiring. Like talents. Like, I think this is something that we all share throughout the industry, that we don't have enough people, either because there's not enough people transitioning into quantum that have already had a career in, I don't know, classical compilation, that will be interested in moving into a quantum career, or building, I don't know, being interested in RF electronic specialists that would be interested in coming into the quantum field as well. So making sure that we are upskilling the existing workforce, and not just only training new talents that can come out of school with their PhD in quantum, but that can also bring their expertise in all of these domains that we need to build a quantum computer. It's going to be very critical for the industry.
That's an excellent point. And Joab, just looking from a global perspective, I was quite struck in the report to see that China has invested double the US amount in quantum computing, and given this sort of security race, technology race with China, is that a concern? How do you look at that?
Not so much, being part of the private market. So the US has much more in the private and public markets, so it's not driven so much by government money, which I think is a good thing, not a bad thing. And I think we'll start seeing, hopefully, if I'm right, that the use cases will come later next year. We will see more private money being poured into the industry. And I think you will see it's at one point exceeds the government money. And I think that's the kind of role the government should play. They should play for the longer term, before the people who are very concerned with profits and making money can come in and be assured that they can make money quickly. So I think it's been done very well, and I think we're on a good path.
Bottom line here, sometime in the next 2 years, some big breakthroughs, definitely some workforce pipeline challenges. We have some existing applications and commercial opportunities that are already bearing fruit, and a really big opportunity in the supercomputing space, and a lot of
confused investors who are still wrapping their minds around quantum, and we'll see some more stock volatility is what it sounds like. Well, thank you all so much. I know we could talk all day, but I want to thank you to all our speakers for this great conversation, and thank you to all our audience who's online. This is going to be the end of the live stream portion of the conversation, but we will continue here in person. So thank you, everyone.